Jake Morrison walked into the massive council chamber for what he knew would be the last time. The room was bigger than 3 football fields put together, with seats arranged in circles that went up and up like a giant stadium. 47 different alien species sat in those seats, and every single one of them was staring at him. He had been Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council for 12 years. 12 long years of fighting for humanity's right to be treated fairly. Today, he would find out if those years had been worth anything at all. Amy Carter walked behind him, carrying the files that contained humanity's final proposal. She had worked on those documents for 3 years. Every page represented the hopes and dreams of 8 billion humans living on dozens of worlds across the galaxy. The proposal was simple: give humans equal representation in the council-based. On their population and contributions, the chamber fell silent as Jake reached the central speaking platform. He looked up at the alien faces surrounding him. Some had scales, others had fur. Some looked like giant insects, while others were made of what appeared to be living crystal. Despite their differences, they all had one thing in common: they all thought humans were too young and stupid to deserve equal treatment. "Honored counselors," Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's sound system, "I stand before you today to present humanity's final request for equal representation in this body." A clicking sound came from the Zephyrian section. Counselor Vexthara, a creature that looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a spider, was making what humans had learned was their version of laughter. "Final request?" she clicked. "How dramatic. Your species acts like children throwing tantrums when they don't get their way." Jake felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice calm. "Counselor Vexthara, humanity has been a member of this council for 300 years. In that time, we have contributed more to galactic peace and prosperity than many species who have been here for millennia." The Alterian representative, High Counselor Zanmora, floated forward. Her body was transparent like jellyfish, and she glowed with different colors depending on her mood. Right now, she was glowing a bright orange that Amy had learned meant condescension. Contributed. Zanmora's voice sounded like music, but her words were sharp. "Your species has been here for barely a moment in galactic terms. We Alterians have maintained peace in this galaxy for over 30,000 years. What could you possibly teach us?" Amy stepped forward and handed Jake a datapad. He looked at it briefly, then began to read. "In the past 10 years alone, humans have provided solutions to 37 major galactic crises. When the hegemony invaded the Outer Rim territories, it was Captain Don Rodriguez and the human Third Fleet that held the line until reinforcements arrived. We lost 8,000 human lives in that battle." The chamber was quiet now, Jake continued. "When the plague hit the Centauri colonies 3 years ago, it was Dr. Lisa Park who developed the cure that saved 14 million lives. When the trade routes through the Void Nebula became dangerous due to stellar instability, it was human engineers who designed the early warning systems that have prevented dozens of ship losses." "Anyone could have done those things given enough time," interrupted Counselor Mordick of the hegemony. His species looked like walking rocks, and his voice sounded like gravel being crushed. "But you didn't do them," Amy found herself saying, stepping forward despite protocol. "You had thousands of years to solve these problems, and you didn't. Humans did them in decades." Jake held up his hand to quiet Amy, but he was proud of her for speaking up. She was right, and everyone in the chamber knew it. "The facts are simple," Jake continued. "Humans represent 12% of the Council's military forces. We provide 15% of its economic output. Our colonies produce 20% of the food that feeds the galaxy. Our research centers have made breakthroughs in medicine, engineering, and agriculture that benefit every species here." He paused and looked around the chamber. "All we ask is for voting power that matches our contributions. Not special treatment, not control, just equality." The ancient voice of Prime Counselor Thekvar echoed through the chamber. The being was older than human civilization, and his crystal body pulsed with slow, measured light. "Young Ambassador, you speak of contributions as if they were achievements. Any species can work hard. Any species can fight battles or grow food. What matters is wisdom. What matters is the long view that comes only with age and experience. Wisdom? Jake asked. Was it wisdom that led to the Centauri plague spreading for 6 months before anyone thought to look for a cure? Was it wisdom that left the Outer Rim defenseless against hegemony aggression for 50 years? Was it wisdom that allowed pirates to control the Cygnus trade routes until humans built the defense grid that stopped them? The chamber erupted in angry sounds from various species. Clicking, humming, roaring, and other noises that human ears could barely understand filled the air. Prime Counselor Thekvar's voice cut through the noise. Enough, Ambassador Morrison. The Council has reviewed your species' request. We have discussed it thoroughly. Our decision is final. Jake felt Amy tense beside him. This was the moment they had been preparing for. Humanity will retain its current status as a junior member of the Galactic Council. You will continue to have one vote in Council matters, the same as any other junior member. This decision is based on your species' youth and relative inexperience. In galactic affairs, the silence that followed was deafening. Jake looked down at the datapad in his hands. 3 years of work. Detailed plans for improving galactic defense, trade, agriculture, and research. Solutions to problems that have plagued the galaxy for centuries. Old dismissed because humans were considered too young. He closed the datapad and looked up at the assembled aliens. I see, he said quietly. Then there's nothing more to discuss. Counselor Vexthara's mandibles clicked with amusement. Don't look so disappointed, Ambassador. Perhaps in another 1,000 years, when your species has matured, we can revisit this matter. Oh, we won't be here in 1,000 years, Jake replied calmly. The clicking stopped. Excuse me? I said we won't be here in 1,000 years? In fact, we won't be here in 1,000 days or 1,000 hours. Jake turned to address the entire chamber. As of today, humanity is withdrawing from the Galactic Council. All human. Personnel will be recalled from Council territory within 90 days. All human installations, research facilities, and military bases will be closed. All technological cooperation agreements will be terminated. The chamber exploded into chaos. Representatives were shouting, clicking, humming, and making sounds that had no human equivalent. Through it all, Jake's voice remained calm. All human ships will be withdrawn from joint operations. The Cygnus defense grid will be shut down and dismantled. The Helix mining operations will cease. The Centauri agricultural research centers will be closed. The Void Nebula monitoring stations will go dark. High Counselor Zanmora floated forward, her transparent body now pulsing with alarm colors. You can't be serious. The economic disruption alone will be considerable, Jake agreed. But that's not humanity's problem anymore. We offered to be partners. You chose to treat us as children. Children don't have responsibilities. Counselor. Mordic stood up, his rock-like body towering over the platform. This is blackmail. You're threatening the stability of the entire galaxy. Jake smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. It wasn't a pleasant smile. Counselor Mordic, humanity is not threatening anything. We're simply leaving. Taking our ships, our people, our technology, and our contributions with us. Surely the wise and experienced members of this council can manage without us. He turned and began walking toward the exit, Amy beside him. After all, he called back over his shoulder, you've been telling us for 300 years that we don't really matter. Now you'll have the chance to prove it. The great doors of the council chamber closed behind them with a sound like thunder. Neither Jake nor Amy looked back. Outside in the corridor, Amy finally spoke. Sir, do you think they understand what they've just lost? Jake Morrison looked out through the great windows at the stars beyond. No, Amy, but they will. 3 months had passed since Jake Morrison walked out of the Galactic Council chambers. Now, Rick Johnson stood in the empty halls of Research Station Kepler 442, checking his list one final time. The massive facility had been humanity's main research center for alien biology and medicine. For 20 years, humans and aliens had worked together here, making discoveries that saved millions of lives across the galaxy. Now the labs were empty. The alien scientists had watched in growing confusion as their human colleagues packed up equipment, deleted files, and prepared to leave. At first, the aliens thought it was just another human dramatic gesture. They expected the humans to change their minds and come back within a few weeks. They were wrong. "That's the last data core," Rick called to his partner, Dr. Helen Martinez. She was running final checks on the quantum communication system that connected the station to research facilities across human space. Helen looked up from her console, tiredness clear on her face. They had been working 18 hours a day for 3 months to complete the evacuation. Every piece of human research, every breakthrough, every ongoing experiment had to be carefully moved to new facilities in human territory. "The Zephyrians have been sending messages all week," Helen said. "They want access to the bioregeneration research we were doing." Rick sealed the last storage container and shook his head. "Too bad for them. They should have thought about that before they voted against us 15 times in a row." The bioregeneration research was particularly important. Humans had discovered a way to help alien species heal from injuries that had been considered permanent for thousands of years. The breakthrough could have revolutionized medicine for dozens of species. Now that research was being moved to human space, where it would benefit only humanity's allies. Similar scenes were happening on 47 different worlds. Captain LeVar Scott was overseeing the evacuation of Fortress Hadrian, the massive military base that had protected the Cygnus trade routes for 70 years. The fortress was built into a large asteroid and housed 30,000 human soldiers along with alien allies from 12 different species. The alien soldiers watched in growing worry as their human friends dismantled equipment and loaded it onto transport ships. These weren't just any pieces of equipment. The humans had built most of the fortress's advanced systems. The targeting computers, the shield generators, the communication networks, even the life support systems in some sections had been designed and built by human engineers. "Captain Scott," called Chief Engineer Pete Williams from across the command center. "The Alterian Trade Minister is here again. He says it's urgent," LeVar sighed. Trade Minister Kelthani had been visiting every day for 2 weeks, becoming more desperate each time. The Alterians were starting to understand that the humans hadn't just provided workers for the Cygnus defense system. They had designed it, built it, and maintained it. Without human engineers, the system would start breaking down within months. "Tell him the same thing I told him yesterday," Lavra said. "All human military equipment is being moved to human space. If the Council wants to defend the trade routes, they can do it with their own technology." The massive cargo ship USS Independence slowly moved away from Fortress Hadrian's docking bay. It was carrying the last group of human soldiers, along with tons of equipment that had been built with human technology. Through the ship's windows, Lavra could see Alterian technicians frantically trying to understand the fortress's control systems. The problem was that galactic law had never required species to share the technical details of their equipment. The humans had built the systems and operated them, but they had never been forced to explain exactly how they worked. Now, with the human engineers gone, the aliens were discovering that their primitive technology was more complex than anyone had realized. On the bridge of the Independence, Commander Bob Turner monitored the communication channels as they left Council space. The radio chatter was becoming more frantic by the day as the reality of the human withdrawal became clear. "Sir," called Communications Officer Nancy Blake, "we're getting priority messages from 17 different Council worlds. They all want technical help with systems that are starting to fail." Bob smiled grimly. "Send them all to Council headquarters. I'm sure those wise and experienced leaders will figure something out." As the Independence jumped into hyperspace, carrying the last human military unit out of Council territory, something happened that hadn't occurred in over 70 years. Pirates attacked a convoy in the Cygnus trade routes and succeeded. The attack itself wasn't particularly sophisticated. A small group of raiders with outdated weapons managed to disable 3 cargo ships and steal their contents. In the old days, such an attack would have been detected by human monitoring stations. Hours before it happened, Human patrol ships would have intercepted the pirates long before they reached the trade convoy, but the monitoring stations were now unmanned, and the patrol ships were gone. On the agricultural world of Centauri Prime, Dr. Sam Wilson was loading the last of his research onto a transport ship. For 15 years, he had worked with alien farmers to develop new crops that could grow in the harsh conditions of frontier worlds. His work had helped feed billions of beings across dozens of species. The local Centauri farmers had gathered to watch him leave. They didn't understand why he was going. They had always been friendly to the humans. They had worked together, shared meals, even celebrated each other's holidays. "Dr. Wilson," called Farmer Kextel, his forearms gesturing in distress. "Why must you leave? We are friends, are we not?" Sam paused in his loading and looked at the alien farmer. Kextel was a good being who had never treated humans badly. But Kextel wasn't the one making decisions in the Galactic Council. "We are friends, Kextel," Sam said sadly. "But friendship isn't enough when your government treats us like children. We can't stay where we're not wanted as equals." "But the new crop strains," Kextel pleaded. "The disease-resistant grain that feeds half the Outer Rim colonies. Without your guidance, the plants will keep growing for a few more seasons," Sam interrupted. "After that, you'll need to develop your own agricultural science. Or you can ask the Council to treat humanity as an equal partner and invite us back." As Sam's transport ship lifted off, Kextel and the other farmers watched it disappear into the sky. They didn't know it yet, but within 6 months, a plant disease would begin spreading through their crops. It was a disease that Sam Wilson's research team had been working to prevent. Without human agricultural scientists, the disease would destroy 30% of the harvest before anyone figured out how to stop it. The evacuation continued across the galaxy. Dr. Jennifer Lopez closed down the Medical Research Center on Vega Station, taking with her the cure for a rare alien blood disease that affected 3 different species. Engineer Tony Garcia dismantled the mining equipment in the Helix Nebula, equipment that had made mining operations 60% more efficient than anything the aliens had built themselves on every world. The pattern was the same. The aliens watched in growing confusion and worry as humans calmly, methodically, and thoroughly removed every trace of human presence from Council space. There was no anger, no shouting, no dramatic gestures. The humans simply packed up their things and left. Captain Maria Santos commanded the evacuation fleet as it gathered at the edge of Council space. Hundreds of ships carried millions of humans and all their possessions toward the frontier regions where humanity had been building new colonies. "Final count, Captain," reported her aide, Lieutenant Chris Parker. 2.3 million humans evacuated from Council space, all research facilities closed. All military installations abandoned or dismantled. All technological cooperation agreements terminated. Maria looked out at the fleet of ships carrying humanity away from the galactic civilization they had helped build and protect for 3 centuries. "Any messages from the Council?" she asked. "A few requests for technical assistance," Chris replied. "Nothing official." Maria nodded. The Council leadership was still too proud to admit they had made a mistake. They would learn soon enough. As the human fleet jumped into hyperspace, heading for the frontier worlds where they would build a new future, the Galactic Council experienced something it hadn't faced in 50,000 years, uncertainty about the future. The humans had left quietly, without threats or ultimatums. But in their silence, they had taken with them the innovations, the solutions, and the quiet competence that had held galactic civilization together. Now the galaxy would discover what it was like without them. 6 months after the humans left, Counselor Vexthara stood in what remained of Mining Station Omega-7. The facility looked like a war zone. Twisted metal and broken equipment were scattered everywhere. Emergency lights flickered in the darkness, and the air smelled of burned electronics and fear. "Tell me again how this happened," she demanded, her mandibles clicking with barely controlled anger. Engineer Tixmora shifted nervously beside her. His insect-like body was smaller than hers, and his voice trembled as he spoke. The mining drones require constant adjustment because of the electromagnetic storms in the Helix Nebula, he explained. The humans had created a computer program that automatically fixed the drone's navigation systems when the storms interfered with their sensors. And without this program? Vextara asked, though she already knew the answer. Without it, 16 mining drones flew into the station's main reactor. The explosion destroyed half the facility and killed 43 workers. Vextara looked at the wreckage around her. This mining station had operated safely for over a century with human oversight. Now, after just 6 months without them, it was a smoking ruin. Can we rebuild the program? She asked. Tixmora's mandibles drooped with shame. The human computer. Code is based on mathematical principles that we don't understand. Their approach to solving problems is very different from ours. They think in ways that seem random to us, but somehow they always find solutions that work. Similar disasters were happening across the galaxy. On the agricultural world of Centauri Prime, Farmer Kextal stood in his fields watching his crops die. A plant disease was spreading through the grain that fed billions of beings across dozens of worlds. The disease wasn't new, but the treatment, for it was gone. Dr. Sam Wilson had been working on a new vaccine for this exact disease before the humans left. His research was 90% complete. The remaining work would have taken him maybe 2 months to finish, but now his laboratory was empty, his research files were deleted, and his experimental samples were destroyed. The Centauri government had tried to hire alien scientists to continue the work, but none of them understood human research methods. Where human scientists saw patterns and connections, the aliens saw only chaos and confusion. How long before we lose the entire harvest? Kextal asked the agricultural inspector who was examining his dying plants. The inspector, a Zephyrian, named Veltar, clicked his mandibles sadly. At the current rate of spread, 6 weeks. Maybe 8 if we're lucky? Kextal looked across his fields at the grain that was supposed to feed his family and thousands of others. What about the other worlds? Are they having the same problem? Worse, Veltar replied. At least your world still has some healthy crops left. 3 colonies in the Outer Rim have already lost everything. On the bridge of the Alterian flagship Luminous Dawn, Admiral Kelson received a report that made his transparent body flicker with alarm. His ship was one of 12 vessels that had been sent to investigate strange readings in the Void Nebula. It should have been a routine patrol. Admiral, called his navigator, we're detecting massive energy fluctuations ahead. The stellar activity is off the charts? Kelson floated toward the main display screen. What kind of energy fluctuations? Solar flare activity, gravitational distortions, and what appears to be the formation of a new black hole. The Admiral's body pulsed with shock. A new black hole? That's impossible. The Void Nebula has been stable for thousands of years. Sir, interrupted the communications officer, I'm receiving emergency signals from the cargo convoy that entered this region yesterday. They're reporting severe damage from gravitational shear. Kelson realized with growing horror what had happened. The humans had maintained a network of monitoring stations throughout the Void Nebula. These stations had tracked stellar activity and warned ships about dangerous conditions. The early warning system had saved countless lives over the decades, but the monitoring stations had been shut down when the humans left. Now ships were flying blind into one of the most dangerous regions of space. How many ships were in that convoy? Kelson asked. 43 vessels, sir. Mostly cargo haulers carrying supplies to the Outer Rim colonies. And how many are still responding to communication? The communications officer's voice was barely a whisper. 14, sir. 29 ships lost in a single incident. Over 800 crew members dead or missing. All because the Council had been too proud to treat humans as equals. The disasters weren't limited to space. On the resort world of Paradise Station, Chief of Security Morkex faced a crisis he had never experienced before. The station's crime rate had increased by 300% in just 6 months. The problem wasn't that the station had become more dangerous. The problem was that the security systems designed and maintained by humans were failing. Without human technicians to maintain the equipment, security cameras went dark. Alarm systems malfunctioned and identification scanners stopped working properly. "Chief," called Detective Yaxtel from across the security center, "we have another break-in at the luxury hotels. The perpetrators disabled the security system before they entered." Morkex looked at the bank of dead screens that should have been showing security feeds from across the station. "How did they disable the system?" "We don't know, sir. The human technicians never showed us how the security networks actually functioned. They just maintained them and told us when something was wrong." Similar problems were occurring on worlds throughout Council space. The humans hadn't just been workers or soldiers or researchers. They had been the ones who found solutions to problems that other species hadn't even realized existed. Prime Counselor Thekvar called an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The ancient being's crystal body pulsed with distress as representatives from 44 species gathered in the Great Chamber. 3 species had already declared independence from the Council, unable to maintain their infrastructure without human support. "The reports from across Council space are troubling," Thekvar announced, his voice carrying the weight of 50,000 years. "Economic losses are mounting. Infrastructure is failing. Several colony worlds are requesting emergency assistance." "Counselor." Zanmora floated forward, her transparent body dim with stress. "The trade networks have collapsed in 17 different sectors. My people alone have lost over 60 billion credits in the past 6 months. The humans weren't just contributors to our economy. They were the ones who made it work efficiently." "Hi." Admiral Zarthok of the Hegemony military stood to address the assembly. His rock-like species had always prided themselves on their strength and independence, but even they were struggling. "The Void Nebula incident cost us 29 ships and 800 lives," he reported grimly. "The humans had established monitoring systems throughout that region that we never bothered to understand. We assumed their technology was primitive, but it was keeping us safe from dangers we didn't even know existed." Counselor Mordic shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Surely we can adapt. Our species have survived for millennia without human assistance, have we?" asked Counselor Velmer of the Centauri Federation. "The agricultural crisis is spreading to 14 different worlds. Food shortages are beginning to affect billions of beings. The humans had solutions to problems we didn't know we had." The reports continued for hours. Medical research programs had stalled without human insights into biological adaptation. Engineering projects were failing without human innovations in resource management. Diplomatic initiatives were collapsing without human mediators who somehow managed to bridge cultural gaps that seemed impossible to cross. Trade Minister Kelthani of the Alterians presented the economic data. "The overall galactic economy has contracted by 23%. Unemployment is rising on 37 worlds. The cost of basic goods has increased by an average of 40% due to supply chain disruptions." "How did we become so dependent on one species?" asked Counselor Yexstar of the outer colonies. "We didn't become dependent," replied Counselor Vexthara quietly. "We were always dependent. We just never realized it because the humans made everything work so smoothly that we took it for granted." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For 300 years, humanity had been solving problems, preventing disasters, and improving life for everyone in the galaxy. They had done it so well that the other species had forgotten how difficult these tasks actually were. Prime Counselor Thekvar spoke into the silence. "What are our options?" "We could try to recreate their technologies," suggested Engineer Tixmora. "Given enough time and resources." "How much time?" Thekvar interrupted. "For the critical systems? Perhaps 50 to 100 years, assuming we can understand their methods at all." "And in the meantime?" "In the meantime, the galaxy falls apart," Vexthara said bluntly. "More colonies will declare independence. More trade routes will become too dangerous to use. More essential systems will fail." The great chamber was quiet except for the various breathing, humming, and clicking sounds of 44 different species contemplating their future. Finally, Thekvar asked the question, that everyone was thinking but no one wanted to say out loud. How do we ask them to come back? 1 year after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council faced its worst crisis in 50,000 years. The emergency session was smaller than usual because 6 minor species had already left the Council. They couldn't maintain their worlds without human technical support, so they had declared independence and were trying to make deals with humanity directly. Ambassador Rex Turner walked into the council chamber with a confidence that his predecessor Jake Morrison had never shown. Rex looked relaxed, almost amused by the desperate energy he could feel from the assembled aliens. Unlike a year ago, when humans had begged for equal treatment, now the aliens were the ones who needed something. Honored counselors, Rex began, his tone polite but carrying an undertone that made several species shift uncomfortably. Thank you for inviting us back to these chambers. Prime Counselor Vekvar S. crystal body pulsed with what humans had learned was deep embarrassment. The ancient being who had dismissed humanity as too young now looked diminished, his glow much dimmer than before. Ambassador Turner, Vekvar said carefully, the Council has spent considerable time reconsidering our previous position regarding human membership. We are prepared to offer humanity full membership status in the Galactic Council. Rex smiled and looked down at his datapad. Full membership. How generous of you. He paused and looked back up. That would include voting rights proportional to our population and contributions, correct? Counselor Vexthara S. mandibles clicked nervously. Within reasonable limits, of course. Within reasonable limits, Rex repeated slowly. Of course. And what about the Cygnus defense grid? I understand there have been some difficulties in that region. High Admiral Zarthok stepped forward, his massive rock-like frame somehow looking smaller than it had a year ago. The proud military leader now appeared almost humble. The piracy situation has become impossible to control, he admitted. In the past year, we've lost more cargo ships to raiders than we lost in the previous 50 years combined. The defense systems you built were more sophisticated than we realized. More sophisticated than you realized, Rex nodded. I see. And the Helix mining operations, how are those proceeding? Engineer Tixmora's voice was barely audible. Operating at 20% of previous capacity, sir. The adaptive navigation algorithms that prevented accidents were apparently quite complex. The same algorithms that we offered to share 3 years ago in exchange for equal representation, Rex noted. Consulting his datapad, the same algorithms that this council dismissed as primitive computational methods. During the debate over human membership rights, the chamber fell completely silent except for the various breathing and nervous sounds of 41 different species. 3 more had left since the session began, declaring that they couldn't afford to wait for lengthy negotiations while their worlds suffered. Rex let the silence stretch for a full minute before continuing. I should mention that the Terran Federation has been quite busy this past year. We've established new partnerships with many former Council territories. The Rigel Commonwealth, the Free Worlds Alliance, the Independent Systems Collective. All of them found they preferred dealing with us directly rather than going through Council bureaucracy. Counselor Calthani's transparent form flickered with alarm. Those were Sovereign Council territories. Were, Rex corrected gently, past tense. They chose independence when they realized the Council couldn't provide the services they needed. We simply offered them the same protection, trade agreements, and technical support they were used to receiving. Minus the Council oversight, of course. Trade Minister Yelmora of the Centauri Federation leaned forward desperately. Ambassador Turner, our agricultural crisis has spread to 23 worlds. Billions of beings are facing food shortages. Surely humanitarian concerns outweigh political disputes. Rex turned to look at the Centauri representative. Humanitarian concerns. Interesting phrase coming from species that voted against human representation 15 times in 3 centuries. He paused. But you're right. Humanitarian concerns should outweigh politics. That's why we've been providing food aid to the independent worlds that have joined our alliance. What about Council worlds? Asked Counselor Mordick. What about them? Rex replied. The council made it clear that our contributions weren't particularly valuable. I'm sure your experienced leadership can handle the situation. Prime Counselor. Thekvar's ancient voice carried a note of desperation that hadn't been heard in the chamber for millennia. Ambassador Turner, what would it take for humanity to return to the council? Rex closed his datapad and looked around. The chamber. It was the same chamber where humanity had been dismissed as too young, too inexperienced, too presumptuous to deserve equal treatment. Now these same beings were begging for human help. The Terran Federation will consider returning to council membership under specific conditions, he said formally. First, full voting rights based on population and economic contribution, not on how long our species has been in space. Several council members started to object, but Rex continued calmly. Second, permanent human representation on the council. Security Committee, the Economic Planning Board, and the Scientific Research Directorate. That's unprecedented, screeched Councillor Stor. So was dismissing the species that provided 12% of your military, 15% of your economy, and solutions to 37 major crises, Rex replied. But you set that precedent. Third, he continued, a formal apology from this council for 3 centuries of dismissive treatment and acknowledgement that human contributions were consistently undervalued. The chamber erupted in angry sounds from various species, but Rex wasn't finished. Fourth, any technologies or innovations previously developed by humans and currently in use by council members will require licensing agreements. The Cygnus Defense Grid, the Helix mining systems, the Centauri agricultural treatments, the Void Nebula monitoring networks. All will be operated under human oversight with appropriate compensation. Councillor Mordick stood up, his rock-like body shaking with rage. This is extortion! You're holding the entire galaxy hostage, Rex shrugged. This is business, Counselor. The same kind of business that allowed humanity to establish profitable partnerships with 37 former council worlds in the past 12 months. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of species that had once considered humans beneath their notice. The council spent 50,000 years believing that age equals wisdom, that longevity equals capability. You thought that because you were older, you were automatically better. Humanity spent 3 centuries proving that innovation and determination could accomplish what millennia of ancient wisdom couldn't. Rex paused, letting his words sink in. You dismissed us because we were young. You need us because we're effective. Councillor Vextara's mandibles clicked rapidly with what humans recognized as panic. The economic disruption alone would be catastrophic if these conditions aren't met. Would be? Rex asked. Councillor, the disruption is already happening. Food shortages, infrastructure failures, security breakdowns, trade route collapses. The galaxy is discovering what it's like without human contributions, Trade Minister Kalthani floated forward desperately. Surely we can negotiate these terms. Some compromise. The time for compromise was 3 years ago when we offered partnership and were told we were too young to matter, Rex interrupted. You had 3 centuries to treat us fairly. Instead, you gave us junior status while taking our innovations, our solutions, and our sacrifices for granted. He stood up and prepared to leave, just as Jake Morrison had done a year earlier. The Terran Federation's terms are final and non-negotiable. You have 1 month to decide. After that, we'll assume you've chosen to continue managing galactic affairs with your own ancient wisdom. As Rex walked toward the exit, Prime Counselor Thekvar called out one last desperate question. What if we refuse? Rex paused at the chamber. Doors and looked back. Then you'll discover whether 50,000 years of experience can replace 300 years of human innovation. Based on the past 12 months, I wouldn't bet on it. The great doors closed behind him, leaving the council to contemplate a choice between their pride and their survival. 2 years after the Great Departure, as history books were already calling it, the galaxy looked completely different. The Galactic Council still met in the same massive chamber, but the power structure had changed forever. Humans were no longer asking for a seat at the table. They were running the table, President Carolyn Nash stood at the podium where Jake Morrison had once pleaded for equality. Now she held the position of Senior Human Representative, a rank created specifically to acknowledge humanity's leadership role in galactic affairs. Beside her stood Admiral Kevin Brooks, commander of the Joint Defense Forces, and Dr. Patricia Lee, head of the Galactic Innovation Council. The quarterly reports show continued improvement across all sectors, Carolyn announced to the Assembly. Of 41 species, 6 more had left the Council in the past year, choosing to join humanity's growing alliance instead. Piracy in the Cygnus trade routes has dropped to the lowest levels in a century. The Helix mining operations are now producing 20% more than before the crisis. Agricultural yields in the Centauri sector have reached record highs. Councillor Vextara, now serving as Deputy Defense Coordinator under Admiral Brooks, clicked her mandibles in genuine appreciation. The proud Zephyrian, who had once mocked human contributions, now worked directly under human leadership. The new adaptive defense protocols have exceeded all expectations, she reported. I must admit that human problem-solving methods continue to surprise us. Where we see obstacles, humans see opportunities. Prime Councillor Lekvar, his crystal body now pulsing with contentment instead of stress, addressed the Assembly. The ancient being who had once dismissed humanity as too young now spoke of them with deep respect. The Council acknowledges that our previous policies were based on outdated thinking. The past 2 years have proven beyond doubt that wisdom comes not from age, but from results. Innovation trumps tradition? Admiral Brooks stepped forward to deliver the military report. His calm confidence was a stark contrast to the desperation that had filled this chamber 2 years earlier. The combined human-alien defense fleets have successfully stopped 4 major hegemony invasions in the Outer Rim. The new joint training programs have improved overall fleet effectiveness by 57%. What he didn't mention, but what everyone in the chamber understood, was that human military strategies had revolutionized galactic defense. Human tactics weren't based on ancient battle plans or traditional formations. They adapted constantly, using creativity and innovation to defeat enemies that had been problems for millennia, the hegemony. Once the galaxy's most feared military threat had been stopped cold by human-led forces that thought outside the box. Where alien commanders followed predictable patterns, human leaders used surprise, misdirection, and rapid adaptation to win battles that should have been impossible. Dr. Patricia Lee concluded the session with the research report. Her team had made more scientific breakthroughs in 2 years than the Council had achieved in the previous century. The new collaborative research programs have produced advances in 23 different fields, she announced. By combining human adaptability with alien knowledge, we've solved problems that neither could have handled alone. The medical breakthroughs alone had saved millions of lives. Human researchers had a gift for seeing connections that escaped other species. They could take alien research that had been stuck for decades and find the missing piece that made everything work. As the Council session ended, Carolyn Nash reflected on how dramatically things had changed. The same chamber that had once dismissed humanity as too inexperienced now looked to human leadership for solutions to every major problem. In her private office later, Carolyn reviewed a message from Earth. The planet that had once been humanity's only home was now the unofficial capital of a growing confederation of worlds. 53 former Council territories had joined the Terran Federation, choosing human leadership over Council bureaucracy. Her aide, Commander Ryan Parker, entered with the daily reports. Madam President, we have requests for human advisors from 15 different species, applications for Federation membership from 8 more worlds, and 5 invitations to mediate territorial disputes. Carolyn smiled as she looked out at the stars through her office window. Human ships were exploring regions of space that had been considered too dangerous for millennia. Human scientists were making discoveries that would benefit all species. Human diplomats were solving conflicts that had raged for centuries. You know what's ironic, Ryan? She said, "What's that, ma'am? We never wanted to dominate anyone. We just wanted to be treated as equals. Now that they respect us as equals, they keep asking us to lead," Ryan laughed. Maybe that's the most human thing of all. We succeed not by trying to control others, but by refusing to accept being treated as inferior. The transformation hadn't been easy. Many alien species had struggled to accept human leadership. Their pride had been hurt by having to admit that the young species they had dismissed was actually more capable than they were, but the results spoke for themselves. Under human guidance, the galaxy was safer, more prosperous, and more innovative than it had ever been. Trade flowed freely along routes protected by human-designed defense systems. Colonies thrived using human agricultural techniques. Scientific research advanced at a pace that amazed even the humans themselves. The Centauri farming crisis that had threatened billions with starvation was now a memory. Human agricultural scientists had not only solved the original disease problem, but had developed new crop strains that were more nutritious and easier to grow than anything that had existed before the Void Nebula. Once a dangerous region that claimed dozens of ships every year was now one of the safest areas of space. Human monitoring stations detected stellar phenomena weeks before they became dangerous, giving ships plenty of time to avoid hazards. The Helix mining operations, which had operated at barely 20% capacity after the human departure, were now the most efficient extraction facilities in the galaxy. Human engineers had redesigned the entire operation from the ground up, creating systems that were safer, more productive, and more profitable than anyone had thought possible. Perhaps most importantly, the galaxy had learned to value innovation over tradition. Species that had clung to the same methods for thousands of years were now experimenting with new approaches. The human example had shown them that being young didn't mean being inferior, and being old didn't guarantee being wise. Carolyn looked at a photograph on her desk showing the original human delegation that had first arrived at the Galactic Council 300 years earlier. Those early ambassadors could never have imagined that their descendants would one day lead the galaxy they had fought so hard to join. "Any word from the remaining council holdouts?" she asked Ryan. 3 more worlds have submitted applications for Federation membership this week, he replied. At this rate, the old Galactic Council will be down to maybe a dozen species within the year. Carolyn nodded. It wasn't that humans were trying to destroy the Council. They simply offered a better alternative. Worlds that joined the Terran Federation got protection, prosperity, and partnership. Worlds that stayed with the Council got bureaucracy, tradition, and slow decline. Schedule a meeting with the Federation Leadership Council, Carolyn said. We need to discuss expansion protocols. If we keep growing at this rate, we'll need new administrative structures. As Ryan left to arrange the meeting, Carolyn returned to her window view of the stars. Somewhere out there, human explorers were pushing into uncharted regions of space. Human researchers were unlocking secrets of the universe. Human diplomats were bringing peace to conflicts that had seemed unsolvable. The galaxy had learned an important lesson: age didn't equal wisdom. Tradition didn't guarantee success. Sometimes the youngest voice in the room had the most important things to say, and when humanity had finally been pushed too far, when they had silently departed from a galaxy that didn't appreciate them, that silence had been the loudest statement of all. Now the galaxy was learning to listen.